Thank you for joining me today. My name is Stacy Clem. I serve the Wauwatosa School District as the Director of Special Education. The purpose of this video is to give you an update on special education and the overview of what has all been done in the 2022-2023 school year, and to give some insight into where we would like to head when we are focusing on this upcoming 2023-2024 school year. As an overview, I want to give you just a snapshot of our service delivery model and really using that coordinator and teaming around other departments and with other departments and the work that we've done around that, and how we've worked to try to build some efficiencies with resources. When I speak to resources, I'm thinking of both financial resources, the resource of time for the staff that are with us, and then the allocation of our human resources as well. I'd like to speak to teaming with the community and teaming with the parents and others in Wauwatosa Read Aloud. All of the people we've teamed with this school year, I'd like to speak to that. We're going to speak about the role of the local education agent, the LEA, who would be the principal, and how the principal utilizes that role within our system. And then give a little update about what will the special educators focus on for the 2023-24 school year. First, before we can get started, I want to ground us in the data. So as the point of this presentation, there were 990 students with disabilities within our system, which represents about 884 families. So thinking of the scope of that, we have a lot of perspectives and a lot of people working to make sure our students are going to, not only our staff here and our community members, but then our families. Like, how are we all working together to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our students? This slide is to really show you, the 11 disability areas and the spread. So we have autism, emotional behavioral disabilities, hearing, intellectual disabilities, other health impairments, orthopedic impairments, significant developmental delays, speech and language disabilities, specific learning disability, and visual impairments. And this is a spread currently within our system. I also want to ground us in the evaluations. So yes, we are trying to work hard to move towards that coordinator model and utilizing coordinators. And I just want to shout out the special ed coordinators that we have within our system. They are not only skilled and knowledgeable about working with students, but they're also dedicated staff. These evaluations, where they typically were diagnosticians doing evaluations, and if you look at the spread of evaluations over the years, ranged anywhere from 150 to maybe at the most 200. The last few years with COVID, they have had over 250, 300 evaluations that they have been managing since COVID has started. And it's not just our special education coordinators, it's also our school psychs, our IEP coordinators. This impacts all people within our system that are part of that evaluation process, and it's been a heavy lift for them. And yet, though the work is heavy, they continue to work to improve our service delivery for students using that coordinator model. So the coordinator is a direct support to the teachers, to the families, and the principals. Those coordinators that we have are teaming with school teams during some of their collaborative spaces to really focus in on inclusion is not a place. Just because we have a student sitting in a classroom doesn't mean they're included. How can we look at that curriculum? How are we differentiating that curriculum? How are we making sure we're meeting their social emotional needs within our classrooms? And they're teaming with principals, making sure the principals understand how service delivery can look for those students. They're really working on having a range of service delivery models for all of our students. When is the students' needs being met and where? How are we making sure that all students' IEP goals are being addressed and followed through on? So they're helping the principals and the special education teams to be able to make those needs. And they're doing that through collaborative problem-solving structures. They're holding huddle meetings, they're holding SST meetings, or they're attending some SST meetings when needed, they're attending IEPs, they're just helping and supporting our teams when they are struggling to know how to meet the needs and how we can team together with families to make sure that we are serving their students. So how that looks is they're a student first, and all students are a general education student as well as a special education student. So they're teaming with all of those people within their building first to be able to access their education. And then the principal is helping support, making sure that the special ed teachers have the resources that they need to be able to meet the students' needs. Then the principal reaches out to that special education coordinator to find out, is this where can we go next? How else can we look at the IEP? How else can we look at the behavior plans? What other needs are we maybe considering for the student? And then finally, I'm helping guide and direct those special education coordinators of saying, yep, let's try these service delivery models. So we're all teaming together, and ultimately the students' first contacts and the family's first contacts are those teachers, along with the principals, along with the coordinators. And I'm teaming with the principals and coordinators along the way to understand their roles and responsibilities. And then speaking of roles and responsibilities, that's where we're talking about that LEA role. That principal is working with the coordinator to help understand how they can help meet the needs of the students. They're supporting the development of the individual education plan, and that LEA is really making sure the delivery of services are happening within their building. So they're attending IEP meetings to make sure they understand what services need to be attended to for each of the students, and then they're helping support those special education teachers to make sure they're able to do those aids and supports. And then teaming with the principal to also understand the allocation of resources and what are the scheduling practices that we're using to make sure that the special education teachers are able to meet the needs of those students. Another huge piece of work that has been happening during the 22-23 school year is alignment and creating efficiencies throughout our system. So those efficiencies has been through teaming with other departments, the business department, the human resources department, the academic performance, to make sure we're being as efficient with resources and staff time and professional learning time as we can. And then also families, working with the Wauwatosa Commissions for Persons with Disabilities, working to develop a consistent structure to communicate with families, building, along with our communication director, building a website to improve our communications with our families. So specifically when I'm talking about teaming with the human resources team, what we wanted to do was make sure we have equitable view of allocation of resources. How are we making sure that we are in line with the general platform of other districts within our area, and then how are we making sure within our own system that we're attending the needs of the students and have common experiences for all of our students regardless of the schools that they attend. To help do that, we did a comparison of caseloads of local districts in the CISA area. So these charts here, I took this data from CISA One. They do a survey last summer, I believe. They did a survey of caseloads, typical ratios of the districts in the CISA One area. In red, you will note that when we moved forward, this is where we are today. This is where we stand when we're comparing our caseloads of students with disabilities. The number of students on each teacher's caseload is what a caseload represents. So if you're looking at that first chart, we are trying to allocate between 8 to 10. We're trying to stay on that low end at the beginning of the year for all of our staff, knowing that we can have additional students who qualify throughout the year. So when you look at the caseload comparison to other districts, we're within range for many of the districts. Then we took that information to come up with a typical range so that we could have an objective conversation with our principals and with the staff within the buildings to be able to say, this is how many students you have on your caseload. These are the ranges we're going to try to remain within. And when we get to that other area of above range, we want to really have conversations of, are you able to meet the needs of students? So that's a teacher to student ratio. Staff to student ratio is when we're looking at the teacher in addition to the special ed educational assistants. So do we have enough staff to be able to meet our students' needs? We had conversations that students with disabilities are not just a number. We can't just say every student with a disability is the same. So we layered in what's called a service matrix. A service matrix audits the IEP for the number of services that are listed out on that IEP so that we could have a more objective understanding of each of our students. So when we are considering staffing, we're looking at not only the caseloads, but we're looking at the service needs. And we're building that to have a transparent view. So all of our teachers know this is how many students you have on your caseload here at one school. Let's look at all of our schools. We're also working to team with our principals and the LEAs to say, we are not just making a decision for one elementary building, we're making a system-wide decision. So we're going to come together as a group and we're going to talk about our resources and how we're going to allocate them and make sure we're equitable across our system when we are allocating them. We've worked at efficiencies within the business department as well, teaming with the director of finance and the chief financial officer. We looked at how the IDEA budget is being allocated. So every grant that we're given has parameters of how you can use that grant. So we wanted to make sure that we were appropriately allocating that grant to maximize our resource. For example, on our IDEA grants, you can't use an IDEA grant for a staff member, but then also have that staff member billed for Medicaid attendant care. So we made sure that the staff that are on our grants are not those that could also bill for Medicaid. And we also made sure that, for example, high-cost students who maybe are at an alternative placement, that alternative placements are not all on the grant, because once cost of a student gets to be too high, we can do high-cost student allocation and get additional resources. So teaming with the business department and the finance department, we spent a lot of time analyzing how we are using our grants to maximize those resources. But not only that, we also work to build the knowledge base of our special education teachers, our principals, about special ed funding, so that they have an understanding of the why and how our resources are being generated and how our revenue is being generated. This created a sense of understanding that our special education teachers assisted us with shifting to that Compass Care billing because it was more efficient for them, and it allowed us to get more revenue from our Medicaid billing because the teachers understood how funding worked and how they could then have some additional resources to meet the needs of our students. So really building the knowledge base was some work we did this year so that our special education teachers had a better understanding of getting additional resources for their students. And then the academic performance. We've been working to build our professional development so that our interventionists and our special education teachers have the common knowledge base to be able to collaborate and plan together. So they're using that knowledge base to develop intervention plans. This year we are making sure that they are having the same understanding of literacy and literacy interventions to allow us to have a larger team to collaborate and problem solve when students are facing barriers or they're not making gains, that not only the interventionists but the special ed teachers can come together to collaborate and have a solid team to come up with next step strategies for your children at home. Making sure we have a cadence for professional learning that supports our special education teachers. So we've been teaming with the academic performance so that a special education teacher not only is getting the knowledge base they need to about the universal instruction, but also their skills as a special education teacher as well. And then systematic problem-solving structures. That's been a big team effort from ourselves and the other departments to make sure that we are using problem-solving structures throughout all of our gaps in learning that children may experience, both social, emotional, and academic, and how are we all coming together to make sure we're coming up with next steps so we can differentiate to meet the needs of different students. And then the data analytics, making sure our dashboards are disaggregated so that we can see and have better awareness of where we're having gaps in our instruction for our students. And then also maximizing the access for student information. Lindsay White and her team have been great. We've been trying to come up with ways. A common concern parents have brought to me is access to information, communication. How can we be better about that? So we're teaming together to come up with a way that families will have access within Infinite Campus. If Infinite Campus is their housing source for student information, they should be able to find their students' IEPs there, find their students' progress notes there. How can we use a common source for all families? So coming this school year, we hope to have IEPs within that same data source for families, and that they can access it whenever they would like. So we're trying to build efficiencies for families, as well as we're looking at some of that data access. And then efficiencies with process. So one thing this district does and still has are strong educators who are working really hard to do their work. But as we're watching the evolution of education, and educators are not coming to one district and staying there for their entirety of their career, there's more movement with educators. We want to make sure that we have really solid onboarding tools, processes written out so that I can communicate to any staff member, this is how you do an annual IEP, this is where you need it, this is how the information you need to do, here are the resources to do your work. So really writing out processes for all things, including the IEP, the evaluation, purchasing, how to become trained in nonviolent crisis prevention intervention. So really having solid processes established for them and resources for them to access when they are unaware of what to do next. And then teaming with the community. I can't speak enough to the engagement events we had and the outreach that I get from the community. We did host 4 community events. We had one in November, January, February, and March. One thing that was really helpful is we developed a communication structure with the families during a community event that all teachers will be using this year. That will help all families to know who their teachers are, who are the EAs working with their students, who do they contact, what is their information, so that families have that who to go to when they're having questions. We're relaunching the parent liaison role. The parent liaison has been in this district for a long time, but it hasn't been utilized. So what we learned from families is that they were unaware of that resource. So we're really working to relaunch the parent liaison role within our community. And we have the Champions for Supportive Education. It's a parent special education committee that we are developing this summer. The team is working together to focus on the subcommittees they'd like to have. They're going to host a meeting on September 19th at Underwood. It will be both face-to-face and in person. And it's a parent-led group around 3 focus areas of information, mentoring, and advocacy. So if you'd like to learn more, on our website we have the minutes about those meetings. The committee name is Champions, and the mission that committee developed is families that collaborate with educators, administrators, and the community to support the diverse needs of all students in Wauwatosa School District. Everyone benefits when we work together. So I'm proud of this group, that they're working hard, and they're using their time and talents to help support all of our students in the community. But of course, we're always looking for more. We have 990 students. That's 884 families. We are not reaching all of our families' voice when we aren't a large community or a large committee. And then focus points for next year. Really, our special education teachers are going to be spending a lot of time diving into defining what specially designed instruction is and making sure that we are all delivering that with fidelity. We're looking at the delivery of services through a range of service delivery options when we're thinking of that specially designed instruction. We have a cohort of special education teachers who are getting trained in literacy interventions. They'll be doing that alongside our literacy interventionists. And then really focusing on those proactive behavior plan collaborations and those structures that we're using. For the IEP, we're going to look at those lagging skills and how are we making sure we're looking at lagging skills through the lens of skills, not will of a student, and making sure we have targeted and specific goals addressing those. And then we're also going to look at the evaluation process for all of our students to make sure that those building teams are part of that evaluation process. And finally, we're going to develop an adult learning framework for principals so that they're able to help support our special education teachers through a lens of roles and responsibilities. Again, I just want to thank this community. It has been a pleasure to serve you all. Families reach out. you share your perspective, but when that's happening, it's done with a positive intent, a team on areas to consider. It definitely takes a village, and Tosa is a place where this is a core value, and it's demonstrated by the families I have had the pleasure to serve. So thank you for the supportive work. I look forward to serving you again this next school year.